Hello and welcome to the WIHS Journal Public Affairs program. I'm Jerry Williams. Join me now for part 2 of my coverage of the New Britain Industrial Museum's open house, where I caught up with director Randy Judd and curator Reza Brown. That's happening now on the WIHS Journal. It's news and public affairs.
If you're just tuning in, I am with Randy Judd, director of the New Britain Industrial Museum. I am on location. He's taking me around a fascinating place.
On to the appliances. Landers, Ferry & Clark was a famous appliance maker. Originally, before electricity, they made things like these hand crank devices. That's a mayonnaise maker with the funnel that goes in to place oil in while you're cranking it around to make your mayonnaise. Meat grinders, which I would ask everybody listening to confirm that they may have a meat grinder in their house, and see if it says Universal on the side of it, or Landers, Ferry & Clark. I bet it will be, especially if you're from in your New England. Your meat grinder is probably made here in New Britain. Toasters here, they started around 1914. The first toaster, I think, that Landers made, which were the first toasters that were made in the country. Electrification of houses was just happening at that time. So you can see these progress from 1914 up until the 1940s was the first time they had the pop-up toaster you can see on the end. Toaster technology really hasn't improved that much since the 1940s. No. It's about the same. Sure, some of the it's gotten cheaper and they don't last as long. Right. But going back to my rule that I learned as a child, these all still work. I guarantee you plug them in, they don't break. The ones you buy now, you're good for 3 years, maybe.
You know, I mentioned how heavy things look back then. You know, they look indestructible. They look bulletproof, you know.
Well, heavy is right, because if you look at that old washing machine up front, we use it for donations. The sign there says, "We will launder your money." You know, so you can put $1 or $5 in there on your way out the door. But we were going to move that temporary location that we had a exhibit, and all we had to do was start to lift it, and we realized we're not moving this thing. They're incredibly heavy. So things have improved in the fact that they're lighter now. You don't need 4 people to move a washing machine anymore. But they did last. I mean, again, that one, 100 years old, it's electric, and I'll bet I could plug it in and get a response from it. Wow. It's probably still work. And stoves, you can see stoves here, all kinds of percolators. Landers, Ferry & Clark invented really the percolator, the percolating system. And to people out there who don't know what a percolator is, ask your grandmother. Yes. That's all I can say. People still prefer to make a percolator, use percolator to make coffee. It has a softer method of pouring the water over the grounds and doesn't heat the water as much, which depletes the oxygen in the water, which takes some of the flavor out. So that's the whole idea behind a percolator. I have to point out this percolator right here that I'm going to hold up. Yep. Now, this percolator in 1951, they sold their 15 millionth percolator, just one model. And in honor of that, they had a solid gold percolator made to look like this by Harry Winston, a jeweler in New York City. And they had a diamond in the top here, big diamond, and ruby down where the indicator is, and it toured the country in all the great department stores across the country. But if you think about it, 15 million sales of one model of a percolator. At that time, in 1950, the population of the whole country was about only 150 million. And that means that 1 out of 10 people would have one of these. But if you really think, well, a household was 3 or 4 people, really 1 out of 3 households had one of these models, came from New Britain, Connecticut, made by Landers, Ferry & Clark across the country.
I kid you not. I'm from Oakland, California, and I remember my grandma. That looks like the exact same percolator that I was used to seeing in Grandma's kitchen as a kid. It looks like the same exact one.
It could have been. And, you know, because, as I said, 1 out of 3 households had one of those. You can't sell 15 million percolators without everybody, a lot of people having one. Yeah. It was worth it. And we're still asking, what happened to that golden percolator that they had made? Yeah.
My grandmother's 3 vices were Coca-Cola, Tarrington cigarettes, and Folgers coffee, perked in a percolator just like that. I can smell it right now, Yeah.
Yep. Well, that was the beauty of a percolator, and a lot of people still prefer to use those. If you've got one in your house, don't throw it out. Try it. You might be surprised.
I still recall smelling because I always loved the smell, the aroma of coffee, and I can still smell my grandmother's coffee in the kitchen being percolated while listening to Paul Harvey on the radio.
Paul Harvey, I remember him.
Now you know the rest of the story. Paul Harvey, good day.
Man, he must be one of your heroes. But I don't know how many people know of him now. But
so we are with Randy Judd, director of the New Britain Industrial Museum, and he's just showing me around.
Yes, and I can also add on Landers, when they were founded in 1865, the products they made included cutlery. They made a lot of cutlery. It was really half of their plant was dedicated to that, and they were called the Cutlers to America was their motto. And over here, in this case, on the right, you can see kind of an odd-shaped knife, which they patented in 1865, which was right as the Civil War was ending. And it's a one-armed man knife. Some people think it looks like a cheese knife. It has a curved blade to cut your meat by rocking back and forth. If you only have one hand because it's been amputated because of the war, and then there's a fork, you flip it around and there's a fork. So that was one of their most remarkable patents. I was in a museum in Key West, and they actually had one of these that were made by Landers here in New Britain that somebody dug up on the beach in Key West. Wow. So there were a lot of soldiers, ex-soldiers from the Civil War who probably had those, and they sold into the early 1900s still. They were still selling that. And I think I've had people in the medical business in here, medical workers, say that it looks for me are the same as some of the articles that are still made for people who are disabled in that way. Although I don't think Landers is getting any money out of the ones that are made today. Yeah. But that's an interesting artifact. And as you can see, they made a lot of beautiful cutlery as well.
We are with Randy Judd, director of the New Britain Industrial Museum. You've been director for how long now?
I've only been director for 4 years. I've been on the board for 25 years.
How did it all start with you being interested? The first 25 years on the board, what's your background in all this?
Well, my last name is Judd, and you might have heard me mention the company North and Judd. So that was my family. So
you're a Judd?
Yeah, that's right. I think when they originally asked me to be on the board, that was the reason, because my last name is Judd. But I look at these pictures of people who were born 3-4 generations ago, and I do feel like I owe them a debt.
Well, talk about your family.
Unfortunately, the Judd part of North and Judd kind of expired in around 1898 when the founder, Loren Judd, he passed away, and his son tragically died at about the same time. And then another fellow, Howard Noble, took over that company. But, of course, we remained here in New Britain. My roots here are just quite deep. And my mother's side of the family, my grandfather worked at Landers, Ferry and Clark his entire life. So I have connections to 2 of those major companies. But I love them all. I mean, the more I learn about all these companies that were here, the more admiration I have for them and for the achievements in the past. And I think today, unfortunately, I don't think we learn enough of this history. But that's one of our jobs, is to be able to pass these stories on and make sure everyone knows the amazing things that happened here. There's also a company here called American Electric Company, which was a predecessor to General Electric. I mentioned that Landers made a lot of electronic things, but American Electric Company was 1880, a couple of years after Edison invented the light bulb. And when I say he invented it, I mean there were a lot of people. It's remarkable if you read about it. There's all kinds of people who were doing the same thing at the same time, but they just hadn't gotten as perfect or close to perfect as Edison had. But a guy named Elihu Thompson was here, and he, for 3 years, they called him Professor Thompson, and he became one of the founders of General Electric because he had AC patents, alternating current, which that's the way electricity ended up going. So he was a very important figure in electricity. He was here in New Britain for 3 years. So we're going to be having an exhibit on that shortly. So that's just another branch. New Britain had a lot of aviation first here. We had the first manned flight in all of New England happened here. We're standing right next to the picture of Charles Hamilton, who was a daredevil flyer known throughout the world at that time. He was just as famous as the Wright brothers. Although he was an inventor, he was like the evil Knievel of the air. And this was in 1910. And before Boston or anywhere else in New England, people you see in our Walnut Hill Park here in New Britain, estimated to be 50,000 people there watching. You can see they're all looking up in this picture at Charles Hamilton because nobody had ever seen somebody fly a plane ever before.
So if anyone wants to come down and check out this nice operation, what are the days and hours?
Well, we're formally open every Wednesday and Saturday afternoon, but also by appointments. So if you go to our website, nbindustrial.org, you can, there's an email on there that you can contact us, or our phone number is 860-832-8654. And call, and you can make an appointment and come other times.
He's Randy Judd, director of the New Britain Industrial Museum. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being patient with me and showing me around. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, man. Now, folks, when I first entered the doors of the New Britain Industrial Museum, I ran into this delightful person. It's Riza, the curator. How are you, Riza?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing okay. You've been very helpful. And what's your story, and how long have you been here?
So I've been here about 3 years. I was hired as the curator in 2020. I came here at the very beginning of my career as a museum professional. So this has sort of been my home for the last 3 years.
What's amazing is that you shared with me your background as far as your schooling.
Yes, I did a BA in anthropology from University of Connecticut. And then I went on to do a master's degree in Viking and medieval studies from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. I thought I was going to get a PhD and become a research historian. Obviously, that didn't end up happening, but I did a little pivot, and then I went and I got another degree in museum studies from the University of Hawaii at Manoa.
Incredible. And what's even further amazing is the fact that she talked about when she was 5 years old and what inspired her in world history, and that was?
It was the DK Eyewitness books about ancient Egypt. They had these really amazing children's books about world history and material culture, and I had never been exposed to that before, and it really captured my imagination and stayed with me my whole life. I've always really had a passion and interest in history, and now as an adult in public history and bringing that to other people.
I also learned that you're an opera singer.
Yes, I was classically trained as an opera singer. I did that for many years throughout high school and college, and it's still a hobby that's very close to my heart.
You care to give us a sample?
I think I could pull out a little Rachmaninoff. I'm maybe a little bit rusty.
Okay. She's Riza Brown, the curator of the New Britain Industrial Museum. Give it up for Riza, everybody. I know they didn't expect this to happen today on the open house. Well, God bless you. Thank you, Riza. Thank you for your time. You've been very delightful.
Thank you so much. It's so great to meet you.
And that was Riza Brown, curator of the New Britain Industrial Museum. And before that, you heard from the director, Randy Judd. If you would like more information about what you heard today, call WIHS 860-346-1049, 860-346-1049. The WIHS Journal, it's news and public affairs.